Hey everyone, this is Aaron and Juwan, and you're listening to Wellness for Real People. This show is for people who are on the go, busy, and looking for ways to live their best lives. We focus on wellness topics in mindfulness, exercise, diet, and sleep, and share quick actionable tactics to improve your health and wellness. We're not perfect, but we're trying to get a little better each day. Let's grow on this journey together.
Is sugar bad for you? How much is too much? What fruits should you eat or what fruits should you avoid? Are carbs the enemy or are carbs our friend? Sometimes it's really, really hard to tell depending on, who's talking or what article you may read on the internet. And so today we're going to be talking about a very interesting subject. We're going to be talking about pre-diabetes, something that you may or may not be aware of, something that you may or may not have, something that someone may or may not have, right? And so I think it's a very, very big topic that I don't think gets enough coverage today. And so I'm really excited to dive into this discussion with you today. We're talking all things pre-diabetes. We'll talk about what it is. We'll talk about some ways to manage it if you have the condition. And we'll also talk about some lifestyle changes that you can make that can reverse prediabetes for some people. So we're back with another episode of Wellness for Real People. My name's Juwan, here with my co-host Aaron. How you doing today, Aaron?
I'm good, man. I'm feeling great. I'm feeling excited. Just glad to be here. Glad for another episode and for us to just keep growing and learning and sharing this with our audience. So just excited to be here, man.
Wonderful, wonderful. So let's talk pre-diabetes. We got a great article this week from Johns Hopkins. We're going to link to it in the show notes because there's a lot of very useful information that definitely want you to read up on if you get an opportunity. But, overall, kind of what are your initial thoughts after reading the article?
Yeah, I feel like for me, I learned a ton, man. Specifically, around things that you should and shouldn't eat. And I think even if you're not pre-diabetic, like these are like really good things to consider and some really just useful, practical, easy things to follow. It's something that we really try to lean into on this show is things that matter for real people. We're not talking about any insane diet changes or like super crazy workout programs that are getting injured doing those things. It's just the simple things that you can do to try to turn things around. And I think the article does a great job of breaking down kind of like a diet plan, what foods to eat, what foods to avoid. And it does a really good job too of just kind of dissecting like all of the information that's out there on this and putting it in a nice like tight package. So I learned a ton. I'm hoping as we share this with the audience as well that they learn from this too, and keep taking steps to make sure they're aware of their status if they are pre-diabetic or not, or like for me, like getting close to that spectrum where things aren't 100% good on the health side. So like making those changes now so you don't fall into that category.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into it. First and foremost, what is prediabetes? It is a big issue, and a lot of people, millions of people in this country have it and don't even know it. And oftentimes, the only way that you might become aware of it is just through an annual checkup with, your doctor, doing some blood work, right? And then, it comes back, may come back high, right? I was at a party just the other day, and somebody was mentioning that, they were just shocked to learn, they're in their, mid 30s, been living a pretty normal, healthy lifestyle, and all of a sudden, doctor calls you up and says, "Hey, you're pre-diabetic. You need to make some lifestyle changes." And he was absolutely shocked.
Yeah.
And so it can happen to any of us. But I think it's important to know what it is, and if you get that diagnosis, not to panic, but what are some steps that we can take to really, like you mentioned, just kind of try to move things in the right direction and be more mindful about our health and some of the choices that we make on a daily basis. So, pre-diabetes, to keep it simple, the article says that people with prediabetes have a fasting blood sugar levels that are elevated, but not to the point where they meet the criteria for type 2 diabetes, right? So it's kind of this flag, if you will, to say, hey, things are not trending in the right direction. It's a good opportunity to maybe make some different choices so that you don't progress down that path to type 2 diabetes. So I thought that was really, really important for us to kind of start off with is just understanding
Mhm.
what pre-diabetes is.
Yeah.
I think the author of the article, Tara Seymour, a registered dietitian, does a great job of explaining that in the actual article. But she talks about when you get this diagnosis, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to eliminate entire food groups, right? So that doesn't mean go out and just cut out all carbs, right? Or cut out any sugar whatsoever, right? That's not actually helpful or realistic, right?
Yeah.
Our body needs a balance of things in order to function properly. Right? But the problem happens that if we have an imbalance of these things for too long, then it can cause problems. And sometimes it's just overall wear and tear over time as you get
Yep.
older. The body doesn't always function as well as it did, when you were younger, right? So there can be many contributing factors to this, but I thought that was really important to state up front, right? That it's not about just eliminating certain things completely, but just being a little bit more mindful. She says all foods can fit into the meal plan. You should just steer clear of those kind of fad diets and those things that promise overnight quick fixes, because those claims are just not supported. So she recommends making gradual behavior changes, those small changes like you mentioned earlier, Aaron, those small changes that lead to big results. um, a big thing that she recommends is the Mediterranean diet, right? Which keeps
Mhm.
coming up again
Comes
and
up all the
again.
time, man, in different
Yeah,
different ways. Like this is a totally different article and topic than what we've had in previous episodes, but it just keeps coming back, and probably for the right reasons. Yeah.
right. Yeah, so we'll link to a previous episode. We did a whole deep dive on the Mediterranean diet. So we're not going to get into that today, but I thought that was really fascinating. That she brought that up, and she loves the Mediterranean diet because it places an emphasis on whole grains, lean protein, and healthy fats.
Yeah, and I think the next part she talks about too is just kind of like the recommendations from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention's version of My Plate, and essentially really just looking at breaking down your portions into these different sections so you can kind of be a little bit more mindful. And so these recommendations actually come from the ADA, America Diabetes Association, of how to like break up your plate. But really, it's starting with 50% of the plate with non-starchy vegetables such as leafy greens. And then 25% of the plate is going to be your healthy carbs like whole grains, brown rice, quinoa. And then the other 25% is lean proteins like chicken, turkey, fish, or tofu. The big key is here is not fried, which is tough because those, like some of those things fried are just delicious, like especially when we're heading in to Thanksgiving for this episode, like the fried turkey is amazing, but something you definitely can't get into too often, right? It's dangerous. And then importantly is water or another 0-calorie beverage is preferred. And we talked about that in previous episodes too, just about the dangers and like how much sugar is actually in some of these lattes and sodas and things that we just kind of take for granted. Like, oh yeah, I'll go pop in Starbucks, grab my latte and like my triple whatever frappuccino and whatnot. And seeing that there's actually like 16 cups of sugar in some of these drinks is just like mind blowing. So I thought those were some good, easy recommendations to start with by really just focusing on how does your plate look divisionally: 50% veggies, 25% healthy carbs, 25% lean protein.
Yeah, I love that visual because it helps me. I'm a visual person. So
Yeah.
when we talk about like how do you build your plate, right? And just knowing that, okay, half the plate needs to be those non-starchy, leafy green kind of vegetables, things like broccoli, kale, bok choy, spinach, these kinds of vegetables, I think is really just like helpful for me from a visual perspective. Because I tend to naturally probably more like 50% on the carbs, right? That's just
Mm-hmm.
loaded up with the rice because I love the rice, white
Mm-hmm.
rice tastes good, right? And then, oh yeah, I throw a little veggies on there, in the past, right? But just trying to put things in the right balance, I think is really important. From the carb perspective, I think one thing I'm learning is right that not all carbs are equal, right? And so
Yeah.
I like that, like you mentioned, these are whole grain things, right? And so I've been we talked about this a little bit off air, but I've been reading this great book. It's called the GI Diet. And you may be aware of a previous episode where we talked about the healthiest fruits and vegetables to eat, right? And we referenced the glycemic index, right? And it kind of gives you a measure of from 0 to 100, right? How basically, how quickly things are going to be absorbed into your body, and whether or not that's going to spike your blood sugar levels, right? And so I really like this book because it dives much deeper into that glycemic index and kind of what foods do what, to your body from a fats perspective, and also from a blood sugar perspective, right? And so the thing that I'm learning from the book is, those whole grains, those are really much better for the body because it takes longer for your body to break those things down, right? So when things are super processed, I know they always say, hey, stay away from super processed foods because they're not good for you. I didn't understand why that
Yeah,
is.
you just like, oh yeah, okay, well, it's probably because it's got sugar, but you didn't understand like the deeper meaning behind that.
Right. Right, exactly. Yeah. So like when there's a lot of foods that are super processed, they strip out a lot of those nutrients, right? And so then it just goes immediately into your bloodstream and kind of spikes things much, much faster versus things that digest much slower in your body, over time. So they're going to give you more sustained energy, and you're not going to have these super spikes, happening. And so I just wanted to throw that in there from that carb perspective. Is you can hear a lot about people saying, "Oh, dude, no carb diet, right?" Or low carb diet, right? And I can understand where people might be coming from with that, but it's not all carbs are equal. That that you got to make sure that you're thinking about being mindful about the types of carbs that you're consuming, right? And so things like fruits and vegetables, we'll get into that a little bit later, right? But even with the fruit side of things, right? Because it has sugar, yes, but it also has a lot of fiber, which is
Mhm.
helpful for that digestion process and taking longer for things to break down. So we could talk about this for hours, but not that much time to get into it. But it's really fascinating when you start to dive into the details of these things, right? And how to really build a balanced plate that is going to be most beneficial for you nutritionally.
Yeah. And then just shifting gears into the article, we're talking more about specific things if you have pre-diabetes, but I think these are good tips for any of us to keep in mind as we go in. Some of the ones are very specific. So if you do find yourself in a pre-diabetic state, there are some foods to avoid just because they can have interactions with some medications. One of those is grapefruit and pomegranate juice. Both normally really good, healthy things. It's just something to be aware of with pre-diabetes. You have specific medications that have enzymes that could have an interaction and have some impact on your liver. So make sure to read up on that. Not a medical expert. Not going to dive into those recommendations, but just grapefruit, pomegranate juice, something to be aware of. And then nutritional supplements as well too. Just got to be careful about some of those nutritional supplements. Things like ginseng, ginkgo, and garlic are good moderation. But if you do like high doses of those, that can cause low blood sugar situations. So just got to be careful. Consult your doctor, consult your dietitian if you find yourself pre-diabetic to make sure that you're not having any interactions with your medications.
Great point. Great point. So what should we eat for breakfast if you have pre-diabetes? What are your thoughts on what the author had to say there?
Well, the big thing too, man, is like I liked like the more traditional breakfast of like bacon, eggs, toast, and when I read those three off, there's no greens in that list. And so there's ways you can make it healthier, right? You could do a whole grain slice of toast and then maybe throw on some healthy fats and things on it like avocado and whatnot, and like try to do things, replace the bacon with something more healthy and something that's actually good for you. But the author Seymour suggested that opt for balanced meals that incorporate lean protein, low fat dairy, and lots of fiber. Cereals with at least 5 grams of fiber per serving, whole fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. And she says if you do skip breakfast, which I know a lot of people, are running out the door and whatnot, try a low carb meal replacement bar or a shake to start your day off right. But get something in there good and healthy for breakfast, and then trying to replace those other things that are definitely tasty but not going to be so good for you long term.
Yeah, man. Oh, bacon.
I know,
Oh,
right?
I agree for bacon, man. I love bacon, but
It's like the
I
hardest one
really,
for me to get rid of too. Is like, if it's there, just I can see, hear it, cook it, and smell it. I'm like, oh, it's hard. It's a hard one to avoid, but it's necessary.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Cool. I thought this was an interesting question. What fruits should you avoid, with pre-diabetes? And the surprising answer, that she stresses, Tara Seymour, is all types of fruit are okay and really unlikely to cause a problem for people who have pre-diabetes. Of course, with the exception of the pomegranate juice and grapefruit juice that we talked about for folks on certain medications. But again, fruit is a carb that has both sugar and fiber, right? And so, you'll get more fiber from eating the whole raw fruit, right, than drinking the juice, right? Again, that goes back to that whole processing
Yep.
thing component of it, right? So if you're gonna eat fruit, opt for just the whole fruit, right? And
Yeah.
eat the whole thing, because it's going to be better for you nutritionally. She says, all foods can fit, of course, watch your portion sizes, and especially read the labels of those prepared items. Fruit juices and canned fruit can contain more sugar, right? Those added sugars to make things taste better, to make things sweeter, that are not necessarily and can actually be harmful. So just something to keep in mind from a fruit perspective.
Yeah. And I really want to hear your thoughts on this next one about customizing a pre-diabetic meal plan. I know, like, Juwan, in the past, you've worked with like dietitians and things, and that's something that I haven't experienced yet. So really curious to see, your take on this piece of advice and just maybe share some of your experiences and how it's helped you.
Yeah, yeah. I think it really is helpful. A lot of this advice is quite general and it's going to apply 90% of the time, but everyone's situation is a little bit different. And so having somebody who can keep your specific your body in mind and limitations and challenges, other conditions that you may be dealing with, I think it's really, really important, right? And so, for me, having high blood pressure, right, I need to be very mindful about, what I'm eating, from a salt perspective, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I can have food from all the different food groups, but if I find myself, eating things with too much salt in them, that's not going to be good for me overall, right? So when
Yeah.
I'm thinking about that balance of fats to carbs, right, to protein, I also need to factor in that, that sodium intake. And so from a very specific example, that she uses in the article, if she says, for instance, right, if you have high cholesterol, you may do better with a low fat approach, to your diet, while someone with a high A1C may benefit from a meal plan that may be a little bit lower in carbohydrates, right? So there's some nuance to some
Mm-hmm.
of these things that can only be properly addressed with somebody who knows the full scope of what you're dealing with and has
Yep.
that nutritional background. So I think it can be really, really helpful, and I highly recommend getting some individual support with your diet.
Absolutely. And then the big question is, if you're pre-diabetic and how much sugar is too much? That's one that's really important to keep your eye on. I think for all of us in general, too, whether you're pre-diabetic or not, but blood sugar levels are a very high indicator of pre-diabetes. This is what the article says. It's no secret that most Americans eat way more sugar than we actually should. And it can hide in less obvious places like processed foods, breakfast cereals, frozen meals, snacks, and then this is the one, sauce and dressing. So a lot of times we think, oh man, we're being super healthy and we got this lettuce and all this stuff in the salad, and then we dump on, the extra fat ranch or Caesar dressing and all these other ones that are just super heavy. And then before you know it, we're eating just as much sugar on top of something healthy and kind of covering that up.
Mhm.
Does mention that, yes, some sugar is necessary for your body to function, but too much can worsen your diabetes. So you can get sugar from other places. Carbs, those healthy carbs are a really good place to get some of that sugar. And it's kind of more of a preferred method for fueling the brain, fueling the body, and then avoiding excessive intake of refined carbs, like added sugar, because those can, as we know, create adverse health effects overall for us. So I thought that was a good start on, part of this topic, but it definitely goes a little bit deeper if you want to dive into some of those other points, Joanne.
Yeah, if you're one of those folks who wants specific numbers, guess what? We got you. We got your back. Okay. So, she said the World Health Organization advises limiting sugars to less than 10% of your total energy intake. And so that's not a lot, when you really, really sit down and think about it. And, they say for added health benefits, you would want to limit sugar calories to 5% or less of your total. So if you're on an average kind of 2,000 calorie diet, using that 10% guideline, you would want to limit, your sugar calories to about 50 grams or 12 teaspoons. And if you're on that 5% category, then you want to stick to 25 grams or about 6 teaspoons of sugar. And like you mentioned earlier, depending on where you're eating or drinking, right, you can get that in just one drink,
Yeah,
right? More
easily.
than that in just one drink, right? So you have to be really, really mindful about this. And that's why, it's such an epidemic in our country, because we're just not aware of what we're putting in our body, day in, week in, month in, year in and year out, right? And so she says, that the American Heart Association is even more stringent. And for people at risk with heart disease, including those with prediabetes, they recommend less than 6 teaspoons of sugar a day for women, which is about 25 grams, less than 9 teaspoons a day, or 36 grams for men. So, one can of soda can have over 32 grams of sugar, right? Which is about 8 teaspoons. So just be careful, read the labels, right? Don't
Yeah,
necessarily read what's on the front of the label, because they'll tell you, but read what's on the back, right? And make
yeah.
sure, you're being mindful. If
I
you're
think
just
that
looking
like
at
one
the
of the
label,
ones that kind of really surprises you too sometimes is like sports drinks and health drinks that are
mm,
supposed to be good for you to some extent. And yes, there's a certain case for that, but then when you really read the labels, you'll notice like you grab a bottle of like Gatorade or Powerade or whatever, and you can see that some of those alone have 30 grams of sugar in one bottle. And like the serving size recommendation, you're not supposed to drink all of it in one shot, but it's so
right.
easy just to slam it back and you just put 40 grams of sugar in your body, just as an example. It's just one of those things, man, where you're like, yeah, I could have that sports drink. Yeah, that's better than drinking soda. I don't drink that. But then you're still getting just as much or more sugar in some situations.
Mm-hmm.
So the labels are so important.
Yeah,
Just take a
yeah.
look. Yeah.
Perfect example. Great example. So let's kind of transition as we close, to some ways that you can manage or even reverse prediabetes. And I think it's a lot of the things that we always talk about on this
Yeah.
show, right? It's a lifestyle approach. So, those well-balanced meals, high in healthy fiber-rich foods, of course, incorporating more physical activity can be very, very helpful, right? She says, sometimes even modest weight loss has been shown to delay the onset of type 2 diabetes by 34%, for 4 years compared to a placebo, which was an outcome of a Johns Hopkins diabetes prevention program. So they mentioned just, stay active, right? Aim for, 150 minutes it's about 30 minutes a day, give or take, of moderate to vigorous exercise, and aim for, they say 10,000 daily steps. You don't necessarily need that much. That's a great amount if you can get it. But, I always say, about even 8,000 is great, even 6,000, right? Wherever you're starting from, just start to measure and try to increase it over time. But try to stay active, because that's really going to help. Losing some weight can certainly help, as we discussed before. There are a couple other tips that you might want to mention, Aaron.
Yeah, I think one of the big ones too, with just the weight thing, is like from a number standpoint, trying to achieve a BMI of 25 or lower is really important. Uh, it's easy to kind of like find your numbers once you have like your baseline weight. You can simply calculate it. You can even grab like something on the internet, on Google search, or a quick app for free and calculate your BMI. And it's something to keep a top of mind and aware of, because that's just kind of one of those easy ones to like kind of really determine where you're at. The amount of weight necessarily isn't always the issue. It's really just kind of like the combination in that body mass index and trying to achieve that proper number. And then once you get past that, I think the other tips are some of the things we talk about all the time, right? Getting enough sleep. We've done like several different episodes on just getting sleep, but sleep deprivation has shown to increase people's cravings for sugary foods. People with pre-diabetes should make sure that they're getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night. We know there's so much that goes with sleep as well. It leads to weight gain. It leads to complications with your mental health and all these things that kind of like add up. So getting proper sleep just is kind of like one of those foundational things. And then lastly, avoiding excessive alcohol and all tobacco, just really good overall recommendations regardless of your health situation. And then this is the big one for us, is staying on top of your numbers, something that we talk about all the time. It's like, when we were younger, we didn't really look at the numbers and didn't understand them. But then once you do, you can start to make the right choices. And by monitoring them, you feel like you're just in a little bit more control of what's going on. And you can feel comfortable knowing like you're either making a good change or a bad change based on the numbers. So I think that one's a really good tip to kind of close that part on.
Yeah, really, really powerful. All of this is, we have some of this is genetic and hereditary, but some of
Yeah.
it is lifestyle, right? And the part that is under our control, we should do everything that we can, right, to manage that as best as we possibly can, one day at a time. Nobody's perfect, right? But it's just a matter of just trying to be a little bit better every single day, and that's what we're trying to do with this show and in our own lives, and hopefully support you on your journey as well. So I want to close with this quote, that I thought was really, really powerful, on our journey together. She says, this is a quote from the CDC: "Life doesn't always give you the time to change the outcome, right? But prediabetes does." And I think that's really, really the message here today is, know your numbers, right? Stay on top of these things. Go visit your doctor and your healthcare team, right? Be aware of what's going on. And then, as you mentioned, once you get the numbers, be able to make educated and wise, balanced decisions that are aligned with where you want to be from your health goals perspective, right? And I think that's really, 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 really the key. We're trying to prevent certain things from happening, and really live a healthy, long, happy, productive life, right? And
Right.
so one day at a time. So any last thoughts you have, Aaron?
No, it's perfect, man. I think the biggest thing here is like, is it possible to reverse prediabetes? And the answer is yes. If you've been pre-diagnosed with prediabetes, progressing to actual diabetes is not a given. It's, your opportunity in that moment to have the awareness and then take control back and take the right action. So, I think that's just a powerful way to end it, that it's not the end. It's just a moment in time to make sure that you're like, wake up, like this is real. We got to do something here. And even before that, if you're trending towards pre-diabetes, if you're seeing those trends and indicators in your numbers, you can start making those changes now. So I thought that was just a really strong positive way that she ended the article.
Yeah. And if you know somebody, right, now you have a little bit more information to help support them on their journey and help encourage them, on their journey, right? So yeah, I think it always starts with knowing your, like we talked about, knowing your numbers and coming up with a plan with your healthcare team, right? Whether that includes medication or not, right? Whether that includes meeting with changing your diet, meeting with a dietitian or not, right? Whether you're meeting with a, somewhat personal trainer, right? There's so many, facets of it. A sleep doctor, there's so, a therapist, right? There's a whole healthcare team, that you could be using to help support you on this journey, because it's no one thing. All these things are interrelated, but one day at a time, one step at a time. We're just trying to be a little bit better. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. It's a little bit longer than our normal episodes, but there's a lot of great information that we wanted to take our time and dive through it with you. And so, we'll be back next week with another great episode of Wellness for Real People. In the meantime, take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Right.